Namaskar, everybody. I am addressing people I can't see, but I think I should be able to imagine all the people who are listening. Well, thank you all for being there. I am, my parents gave me the name Kapil Kapoor. I was a professor in JNU for more than 3 decades. And I was a teacher of basically English literature, but had moved on over the long teaching period that I had into several disciplines: philosophy, linguistics, aesthetics, Indian culture, India's heritage of knowledge, Indian intellectual traditions, and so on and so on. So much so that at the end of it all, my students used to wonder, what is my subject as a teacher? There were so many. Well, I am now 82 and I have been teaching for 62 years. So when I'm speaking, if I repeat myself, or if I kind of, sometimes go into giving a short anecdote or a story, you'll understand that's the privilege of an old man to repeat himself. I have been asked today to speak on Indian knowledge system in relation to higher education as laid down in the new education policy. Let me repeat, my subject is Indian knowledge. Now I like to call it India's knowledge. I have now, in fact, the phrase Indian knowledge system was in fact coined by me way back in 1975. Today, it is perhaps one of the most frequent utterances. You open your computer and you find IKS. But I have changed over now to India knowledge. Instead of saying Indian knowledge systems, India knowledge. That is knowledge that belongs to India, that was created in India, and that has remained alive in India, And my subject is this knowledge, India knowledge, its place, role in higher education as envisaged by the new education policy. We say this as envisaged in the new education policy because, my dears, so far, India's education system has no place for India's knowledge. We are having an education system which is for 182 years, which has been following our great masters, the British, who introduced the English Education Act in 1835. And they explicitly created this education system to produce those Indians who are Indians only in appearance, but in their opinions, values, intellect, and morals, they are British. This education, even today, the people who take this education, we Indians who take this education, we become distant from our own culture, our own tradition, our roots. I call educated Indians disaffiliated people. We are disaffiliated people. Since at present, this education has no place for India's knowledge, therefore, the new education policy has done one good. In fact, it has done two innovations, which I'll come to pretty soon. But I'm talking today of Indian knowledge, higher education, new education policy. Now let me talk about India knowledge. India knowledge is a parampara, a tradition of texts, thinkers and commentators. हमारा हमारे देश में we had a very great Pandit ji from Pune, Pandit Bhagwat Shastri ji, who said, Bhartiya Gyan Parampara, Sanatan Ganga Pravah. India's knowledge tradition is a perennial flow like the river Ganga. And what does that mean? That means India's knowledge from ancient time to today is a continuous flow. There is no break and there is no rupture. We might not have this India knowledge in our education system, but it is very much alive in the learned people, our traditional scholars in India, who are innumerable. They are not known. They live in villages, they live in towns, they pursue Sanskrit studies, they pursue Pali studies, they pursue Prakrit studies, they pursue Tamil studies, and they are great scholars who are characteristically in our typical oral tradition, who remember all the texts, who hold all the texts in their mind. So this India knowledge may not be present in the system of education, but it is very much alive and living. It is a tradition, parampara. Let me explain the word tradition. Tradition in the last 30 years or so had become a bad word, tradition. It was opposed to modern, but that's a very wrong meaning. Our word parampara gives you the idea of what a tradition is. A parampara is parapara, one followed by another, that followed by another, followed by another, and all linked like a chain. So in every discipline, practically every discipline of knowledge, we have a chain of texts, thinkers, and commentators. Tikakar. I am adding the word commentator because the character of our education, our knowledge, the character of our knowledge is that we have in every discipline a primary core text, a core text. That core text is preceded by many texts, but that core text is a summum bonum of the long tradition. For example, in grammar, Panini, 7th century BC, Panini's grammar Ashtadhyayi, the 8-chaptered Ashtadhyayi, is an internationally acknowledged the only grammar complete, comprehensive, rule-bound of human languages. The only grammar of only complete, exhaustive, comprehensive, rule-bound, explicit grammar of a human language. As one of the great German-American scholars, Bloomfield, put it, Ashtadhyayi, Panini's Ashtadhyayi is one of the greatest monuments of human intelligence. Now that Ashtadhyayi is a primary text in the grammatical tradition, grammar. And it was preceded by many grammarians, maybe 1,000 years or 2,000 years of study. But Panini, summarized that tradition. And he summarized it as our one traditional Pandit says, he put the entire ocean in the space of a cow's, cow's foot. जैसे गाय का पैर का साइज, उस गाय के पैर के इंप्रेशन में, गाय के पैर के साइज में धरती पे जो गाय के पैर का सा बनता है, उतने में पाणिनि ने पूरे समुद्र, व्याकरण के समुद्र को डाल दिया, ग्रामर को. And that has become the primary text. But because and it is a very brief text. It is an oral tradition. In oral tradition, the texts had to be very, very brief, precise, because they have to be remembered. They had to be put in the mind. And you can't have a huge text to be put in the mind, discursive text. So these texts were composed in very, very, very metrical and very, very precise, you know, countable syllables, not even words. So Panini's complete Ashtadhyayi is a composition in 32,000 syllables. I'm not saying words, akshara. 32,000 अक्षरों में, सिलेबल में वो पूरा व्याकरण है, और वो संपूर्ण व्याकरण है, एक्सप्लिसिट है, रूल बाउंड है. कोई भी प्रश्न आप उसमें से पूछ के नहीं पूछ सकते जिसका उत्तर उस ग्रामर में नहीं है. तो 32,000 syllables. Now, because they were so abbreviated, the texts were more or less opaque. Ordinary man cannot understand, or a student cannot understand. See, they are so brief. You know, so we needed people to explain, and though people who explained, they wrote a commentary, tika, and they are of different. There are many kinds of tika, you know, but there are paraphrases, there are explanations, there are great, you know, encyclopedic introductions. So, for example, Patanjali's Mahabhashya, the great commentary, is an 8-volume commentary on 32,000 syllable grammar. Anyways, so Tikakar, I am saying our tradition of knowledge is a continuous linked chain of texts, scholars, and commentators. Now, the characteristic knowledge systems, you see, we have, when I say we have a tradition of text thinkers and commentators in all disciplinary formations, all disciplines, or all Indian disciplines. So we should have some idea of what are the Indian disciplines. We divide our texts. One of the typologies of our knowledge texts is a threefold typology: the Nigama, the Vedas, the Vedic literature, and then the Agamas, the literature which came after the Vedic, is deeply related to the Vedic, but adds and explains and modifies certain things, and becomes a foundation of various systems of thought which arose later. For example, Shaivism, Buddhism, etc. So you have Nigama, you have the Agama, and then we have Divya Vidyas, extraordinary disciplines, extraordinary sciences, which are, threshold sciences, which are sciences which are rooted in consciousness, Chaitanya. And by the way, I must tell you that the West, after having reached boundaries of its thought, and they didn't reach these boundaries without Indian knowledge. You must remember, in 19th century, Harvard University started translating in 1891. They translated 123 Indian texts into English. 123. And of course, they told us that Sanskrit is a dead language. And since we are faithful followers, we accepted it. And we said Sanskrit, but they didn't think Sanskrit is a dead language. They translated 123 texts. Then Max Muller, in Max Muller, what I call the Sacred Books of the East, another 50 texts. So, the 19th century Europe, in fact, 19th century Europe depended heavily on Indian thought, borrowed heavily from Indian thought, and all contemporary European thought is derived from the 19th century interaction of Europe with India. I will just give you one example, that Ferdinand de Saussure, who is known to India, Saussure, as the father of structuralism. He was the father of structuralism, From structuralism in Europe, they went to post-structuralism. From post-structuralism, they went to postmodernism. And all this they owed to three persons. Yeah, basically Ferdinand de Saussure, then Trubetskoy of Praha University, and Harald Jakobson of Russia, Jakobson. You see, Ferdinand de Saussure was a professor of Sanskrit in Geneva University, and he used to teach Sanskrit. And his basic interest was in Rigvedic symmetries, and in grammar, and he gave lectures in Sorbonne University. The notes were taken by the students, which were published as a book, and which is the book by which he is known, the a cours de linguistique générale, a course in general linguistics. Saussure, therefore, was a professor of Sanskrit, and he is the father of European thought. So you can imagine, it is Saussure who shifted the European mind from thinking that language is writing. Since Moses, they thought language is writing. But Saussure, following the Indian system, said, no, language is speech. And that created what they call a phonocentric revolution. Anyways, Trubetskoy of Praha University, Czechoslovakia, his PhD was in Rig Veda. Saussure's PhD was in the genitive case in Sanskrit grammar. And the third person, Jakobson, Jakobson, a very eminent European thinker, his PhD was on Vedic mythology. So, the contemporary European thought is an outgrowth from Indian thought they interacted with in 19th century. Now, the knowledge, the texts they translated, they come from these. Now, Europe, after having pursued their sciences and arts and philosophy in the interaction with the Indian mode, they reached a boundary. And now the Western science has begun to feel that we have to now cross a threshold. And what they call the threshold sciences are the consciousness sciences. Sciences which believe not in cause and effect of matter, but cause and effect of Chetana, human mind, human consciousness. And those kinds of sciences in our tradition are called Divya Vidya. Now there are 18 nigamas. I will not spend much time on this. There are 4 Vedas, 6 Vedangas, and there are 4 other things. And there are 120 agamas. 120 agamas, out of which, let me tell you, that 18 at least are sciences. Exactly like your modern sciences. Rasayan, chemistry, metallurgy, all these sciences. So 18 of the agamas are sciences. And Divya Vidya are 64. They are divided into 3 sets. There where the power to do something comes from the mind. Second, the power to do something comes from a blessing of a power beyond humans. Somebody, sits down in deep meditation, like Lord Buddha, for 5 years, and then a flash comes to him. Now that is a daivika, a God's intervention. Something comes from him as a flash. And the third kind of extraordinary consciousness sciences are those which are from control of your senses. If you control the sense of sight, control in the sense that you only see what is good, what is powerful, what is light, and you don't see darkness, you increase the power of your eyes so much that you can shut your eyes and see things. And that is how our thinkers, they saw not by opening the eye, but they saw with their eyes shut, and they were able to see the past, the present, and the future. The future. So these are Divya sciences. I won't spend much time on them. Maybe sometime if your IGNU asks me to speak only on these Vedic sciences, I can speak independently of that. But right now, we move to the next subject. I am saying that in all these sciences that I have listed, 18 enigmas, 120 agamas, 138, 64, 64, 212 sciences. Because in India, we don't make it. There is a difference between Gyan and Vijnana. Gyan and Vijnana. Jnana is the superordinate category, knowledge, all knowledge. Now, one of the subcategory is Vijnana. Vijnana is that knowledge which you gain by observation, which you gain through senses, sensory knowledge, what in the West would be called empirical, the empirical knowledge, empiricism. So those are the sciences which are. So 212 Vedic sciences. We do not give a special prestige to Vijnana, science. For us, everything is a science. After all, in Europe also, this difference between science and art is an Anglo-American obsession, obsession of the English people and the American people. In Europe, they say they have science of music, they have science of dance, they have science of religion. You see, for the science of philosophy, for them, science is simply, science is a mode of inquiry, a mode of inquiry, a very, 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 very logical mode of inquiry in which you use logic and in which you use experience and in which you use experiment. So, your experiment is a controlled experience or recreated experience. So, you do this and that is a science. Science simply means science is a methodology. Methodology, after all, knowledge, what is knowledge? There are objects of knowledge and there are means of knowledge. And there is a knower. And there are systems of validating knowledge, whether it is correct or not. And science is simply one mode of inquiry. So for us, everything is a science. Then let me come to that what are the characteristics of India knowledge. हमारा जो ज्ञान है उसकी क्या लक्षण है, उसके क्या लक्षण हैं? What are the characteristics of our knowledge? First of all, our knowledge tradition is continuous. Imagine we have the world's oldest book, we have the world's oldest poetry, we have the world's oldest prose, we have the world's first book of arithmetics, we have the world's first book of sociology, we have the world's first book of phonetics, we have the world's first book of etymology, we have the world's first grammar, we have the world's first book on meter. You will be surprised to hear all this, but this I'm not making up. This is all attested. I can name the books, So we are in fact a knowledge-centered civilization from day one. Indian civilization, Hindu civilization is in fact a knowledge-centered civilization. And Hindu culture is a value-loaded culture. And Hindu society is a kartavya paraka, a duty-oriented society. And the Hindu society is a unity of consciousness. And that consciousness is generated by a very powerful knowledge system and knowledge tradition. And of course, the Hindu civilization is Sanatan. We are the first idea system in the world. We were the only idea system in the world. We have now actual physical, concrete, archaeological records of 7,000 years, 7,000 BC. We have the Mehrangarh and we have the Sinoli excavations near Haryana, where they have found chariots, which they have dated up to 5,000 to 6,000 BC. So we are the only surviving civilization of the 46 human civilizations, and we are a knowledge-oriented civilization. What is the character of our knowledge? Number one, it is continuous. Rig Ved se leke Guru Granth Sahib tak, Guru Granth Sahib. Let me tell you, because you are a large audience and you are from all over India, I think you should be aware that India has a continuous intellectual tradition from 5000 BC, Rig Veda, to 1600, 1700 AD, 1700 AD, Guru Granth Sahib. You can chart it. Guru Granth Sahib. There is a, both the texts, both the texts were composed in Punjab. Both. Rig Veda was composed in Punjab. Guru Granth Sahib was composed in Punjab. Punjab or Sapt Sindhu is in fact the forehead of India. Forehead. Just as Kashmir was the mind or the brain of India, Punjab is the forehead of India. And Rig Veda is a collection of the sayings of the wise men of those days, rishis, collection of saying arranged in 10 mandalas, and it is in chanda, meter, composed in meter. Guru Granth Sahib is also a collection of the sayings of the wise people of all over India in the 17th century. You have Namdev from Maharashtra, you have Kabir from UP, you know, the 16 great thinking poets of India and 25 Bhats, the Brahmin thinkers, they are put together in the Guru Granth Sahib. Rig Veda's 10 mandalas, Guru Granth Sahib is arranged in 10 gurus. 10 gurus. Rig Veda is in meter and Guru Granth Sahib is also in meter. And Rig Veda is the first text of Sanatan Dharma, and Guru Granth Sahib is the most recent text of Sanatan Dharma. You know, and that is how it is rounded. India's knowledge is rounded. You know, from the first thinker of the Agni hymn, the first hymn of Rig Veda, to Guru Gobind Singh, who composed Akal Stut, a prolonged meditation on the concept of Brahman. Brahman. So you see the character continuity. Second, cumulative. The knowledge is cumulative. In India, every subsequent thinker is aware of all the thought that has gone before him. There is nobody suddenly arises ignorant of the past. If you make a chain, or if you like the Ganga river, as that saying says, if you make the topography of a river, India's knowledge as a river, you can see the continuity of ideas and every subsequent thinker. You know, I give an example. For example, Bhartiya in the 5th century, writing his Vakyapadya, says, I am not saying anything new. I'm not saying it. I'm only explaining what Patanjali said. And Patanjali said it in 2nd century BC. 700 years later, a thinker is saying, and in between, he is aware of everything that has gone on. Everything that has gone on. The Chandavyakarana, the Buddhists, the Jaina thinkers, Bharat Shastra, everything he is aware of. This is how India's knowledge is cumulative, continuous and cumulative. You see? Then third feature is interdisciplinarity. For example, in India, knowledge is not divided into disciplines. Knowledge is considered as one. Knowledge is one, you see? And we only divide it into small domains for convenience of learning, convenience of teaching and learning. But knowledge is one. No single domain is autonomous. Every domain depends on something else. Just as in life, no human being is autonomous. Every human being depends on so many others, so many things. The interdependence, the interdisciplinarity is a characteristic of India's knowledge. You know, when you are doing grammar, well, I'll give you one example of a grammar rule. A rule of grammar in Panini's Ashtadhyayi. It's a rule of grammar. It's the avasana, to pause. I mean, I'll translate it. The rule is to pause is to end. To pause is to end. Now, this is a rule about putting a marker. that the statement is completed. You see, when we are speaking, when I'm counting, I will count, and at some point you will feel I am concluding. Like, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, when I say 10, you understand it is concluded, and I have paused. To pause is to end. Now, this is a rule. This is a rule which is a rule of grammar. But look at the philosophy of Asana. You see, that is why the Rig Veda says, Charvayati, Charvayati. It tells to the human beings, keep moving, keep moving. When you stop moving, that is the end. That is the end. You see, when the arrow stops flying through the air, it falls to the ground. So it's philosophy, like that. And there are many concepts, in fact, principles of other disciplines, which are, for example, lopa, disappearance. Lopa is, lopa is simply the concept of zero, zero. Now, zero is a mathematical concept, and Panini uses it in his grammar also. So, interdisciplinarity.